Thank you. Mady, do we have the half hour that's in the agenda to deal with questions? There's some specific questions that I think we'll start with that are drawn directly from what the panelists have been talking about. And I just want to go back to what Diane said about she's been told that going to the government for support or government sources for support can be the kiss of death when you're seeking early stage funding. I'd actually say the opposite. Maybe I'm in the minority, but I actually think it's a tremendous way to be validated.
I was asked by two journalists actually, one was BBC, one was Sky News, about going to the government and asking, putting out the begging bowl. So it's a wider perception. And the government understands it needs to de-risk these opportunities to enable VCs and private equity, family offices to get involved. So that's exactly
I can just say from my experience in other technology sectors that if I'm going to early stage investors about something and there is public sector funding, that's often a tick. It's not a cross.
It's also the other way around, because government is more eager to actually step in a new technology if they know that later on in time they're being backed up by a bank or a financial party.
Of course.
So it's actually accelerating on both ways.
And Di was describing the conundrum that she faces at the moment in terms of getting the match funding from the private sector. And in fact, I think if it's okay with people, could we start with a question of, would you like to expand on your experiences in terms of what specialist shipping industry people and others have given you?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the presentation there was a little note, but the pushback that we've had, and as I say, it's been entirely rational at every single point on the conversation within the investment criteria that the particular body that we were talking to assess things. Our project was either too early in the technology readiness levels, or the company didn't invest. So this is general non-shipping investors, or didn't invest in the technology, or was too small. Within shipping, what the technology that we've been developing is ideal for the bulker market and potentially tankers as well. Those organisations tend to be SMEs. They're not always blessed with an in-house R&D tech capability, and they're not always thinking about long-term strategy, just getting on with doing a really good job of delivering cargo that keeps our lives moving. So I think for them, what they want to do is to buy the technology. They want a catalogue. They know that CII is coming down the line at them. They know that EEXI is coming. They want to see a catalogue, and they want to see it proven. And so that's where we sit. We've got this technology, computational fluid dynamics, remembering that I'm not allowed to use acronyms. Computational fluid dynamics has demonstrated and verified through universities that we can do this with wind on a particular ship owned by a real live ship owner carrying real live cargo. We've done all that. We can verify those fuel savings in the lab, but nobody will buy it until we put it on a ship. We've got a ship that we can put it on, and that's not as easy as it might sound, but we've got one to do the pilot on, and we've got a commercial offtake agreement at the end of it, but we still can't find £500,000, and that's because in another lot of cases it's too small. So 50 ways to lose your lever.
If I could comment on that, and that experience is daily for me, talking to investors. And what I would like to bring it back is what people in this room could maybe do to help that situation. And on the face of it, maybe nothing, but 2 years I've spent working with the technology. Actually, the Malin guys are helping a bit too. This technology comes out of the United States, and it's helping electrify ocean basins. What we've done for 2 years is get internal champions in potential end users, in first customers, to talk to us. And we talk to them and say, what do you want? What do you need? Let's not just deliver a technology onto the marketplace and ask you to buy it. You tell us exactly what it needs to do. That's led over that 2-year period to these end users and first customers designing alongside us the use case demonstration that's taking place off the coast of Hawaii right now. And if that works, then these guys will buy it. Now, where's the investment piece there, you're saying? Well, the investment piece is here. I can now go to these investors, these same guys, and I can say, see your too early stuff, forget that, because it's not right. These guys are ready to buy, as in write us a check next week, if we can demonstrate that the use cases they have given to us are demonstrated. And this is where I think it starts to get quite interesting for this group, because if we can keep the conversations going, establish them and keep them going, and we can get internal champions inside your industry. This is not my industry, this is your industry. If we can get those internal champions, and I'm not talking about the finance guys, I'm talking about the guys who pilot the ships, who run the ships, who own the ships. And they'll tell us very quickly if we come up with a piece of technology and it's rubbish. Believe me, they'll tell us straight away. But if it's good, and if we need to change it a little bit, they'll tell us too. And then we can talk to investors and say, these guys are buying it. And that is a little part of the solution that we at Greenbackers are trying to bring to this really difficult area.
Well, this ties up very neatly with something that Brent Perry was saying to me earlier about, with his battery technology, almost reverse engineering the whole thing from the end consumer backwards. But one still faces a persistent gap, not just in this sphere, but in any other technology-infused sphere, in terms of getting the money that will fund the closing of that gap that's still there. Nynke, I wonder if you could extend that, or actually go into something that you were talking about. I mean, how does the collaboration that you're talking about really work, and how does it translate into money for early stage projects as opposed to relatively mature ones?
Yeah, that's a good question. Basically, the concept that I was talking about, it actually starts with a dream. You could find a dream kind of vague, but a lot of visionaries can actually dream quite well. So it starts with a dream, or you could say an ambition, and then you share that, you pitch that, and other people actually step into that dream. So what Nynke, for example, did is they invited, I think, probably about 100 people, all from different parties, governmental parties, private, businesses, knowledge institutions, and they just put all these people in a room, just like us. And then they pitched on stage what their dream was, and they just asked openly who wants to help us, and who wants to help us on which part. And then based on that, another discussion came, and you get all these different kind of subgroups. That is how it went, and then people only stepped in if they could actually benefit from it. It's not charity. You need to benefit from it as well. So only people step in who can actually benefit from it. And yeah, basically that merged into kind of a MOU or a letter of intent, and then it shouldn't necessarily become a company, but it can also just be like a collaboration model, or just like Poseidon principles, that you have kind of a contract or whatever. But that actually is how it starts. And then people put in their own money as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And you know,
and one last thing to add is that you also bring the governmental parties in, because they see the societal issues. They want to be on board, but they don't know where to step into, because just like banks, they also get thousands of ideas. So if they know that in that coalition there are parties that are truly absolutely certain that they want to step into this, then they feel much more assured. They want to step into it too. They want to be part of it because it's so fucking amazing and it needs to happen.
Okay.
Sorry, my language.
No, I'm going to swear as well. No, drawn from this and something that you alluded to earlier. A dirty word to some people, banks. Okay. It's really important, if you happen to be looking for early stage funding, to get it out of your head that the banks are necessarily the people to bail you out.
It's too early often.
Because you've usually got to go for equity funding, not debt funding. Green bonds are great, but until they're brought to, until maybe through the kind of collaboration that you're talking about between different elements of the societal piece, until you've got something that's specifically aimed at funding early stage stuff out of green bonds have nothing to do with it. You're still having to convince early stage people to come up with 500 and something sterling per year to match fund something as well established as what Diane's talking about. And I wonder, just before we throw things open to the floor, Andrew, from what you were talking about, the key stakeholders whom you mentioned, what do they actually have to do in all of this?
So government has to do what it can do. There's no point asking people to do what they can do. Nothing happens. I mentioned that. What government can do is they can bring sectors together, very important people together. They can regulate, and they can use their intervention agencies up in Scotland, Scottish Enterprise, Highlands Enterprise. There are others, of course. They can use those to seed, to provide non-dilutive capital, and sometimes to actually provide sculpted debt and equity. So government can do that stuff. Regulation. What the industries can do is elucidate, illustrate, talk about what they need, what the use case is for technology. Get the operational guys to talk about, in an ideal world, what would they like, what would solve their problem. Then the guys who develop the technology need to use these more than this and listen to all of that, and instead of producing something that they have thought up and not deviating from it, take their idea and adapt it to the marketplace. And if you do all of those things, the fourth part of this square, the money will actually come in and say, could we invest in that? That's a completely different, no, but they will, if you set it up in the right way, those conversations will begin to happen. Yeah, we are talking about that.
I mean, we've been working with Drax, end user, demand pull, since 2015, I think. They want to buy green shipping. They've brought their ship owner to the table, and I have to say that they came a little bit kicking and screaming in the first instance, and they had their arms folded and they didn't think this wind stuff would work. They are now, the guys from Ultrabulk, anybody go talk to them, they are a big, big fan of this technology because we listened, exactly as you're describing, Andrew. We listened. They said, oh, we can't get into ports. We went, oh, okay, we'll make them retractable. Okay, so the crew, they won't be able to drive them. Okay, we'll make them intelligent. That's what great designers and great engineers can do.
Agreed.
We've talked to ship owners and they say, well, I don't want my asset to be taken out of the water for too long. The guys at Malin go, okay, well, we'll make a plug and play thing. We do that all the time for the oil and gas industry. We'll just do it. It's not a problem.
Sorry to add.
Yeah, in a minute, but I just want to say that we've done all of that and we get to the end of the line and we say all we need is a quarter of the salary of, a senior executive of a large blue chip. And you can't get it.
Maybe it's too small, maybe you need more money.
Guys, no wonder
Bigger
we need
numbers.
a workshop. I've been advised we have 5 minutes left.
Oh,
That's okay.
Which is, no wonder we need a workshop, because there is so much that needs to be worked through in terms of this. And this is the build it and they will come conundrum, the casinos in the desert control thing. Do you just have to get all the ducks in a row and the money will come, or do you have to do something else? Because persistently the gap is there. Now, could people hold their hands up if they have questions? Okay, I'm going to give precedence to whoever's at the back of the room, and then you, Michael, please. Please say who you are.
I'm Nick Savides from the Lodestar. I'd just like to ask the panel, we've spoken a lot about the government, and Diane mentioned the 11 million a minute that the governments give to fossil fuels. It's a figure that I've heard before. Isn't it the fact that the government is just finding it easier to finance fossil fuels rather than take a chance on new technology, new innovation, and that it will always be the case?
I don't think that's right, no, I don't. I happen to think, and kill me, I happen to think that we're going to need fossil fuels, unfortunately, for a little while. I think we should minimize the extent to which we use them. I think we should harvest all their skill and expertise, some of their money, and transition them to doing things cleaner and better. And I think the tough gig for the government is being honest about that and saying to people, sorry, that we do have to do that. But I do think governments are actually doing a hell of a lot. And I generally, again, sorry, not a political point, I actually think they're doing an okay job. I just think that the harvesting all of this momentum, we've not got quite right yet. That's my view.
And I think we'd all like to see government do more, but what we're talking about right now, before we close in 2 or 3 minutes, is early stage funding. And yeah, please.
About in Scotland, there has been a 100% funding mechanism developed by Wave Scotland, where there is a shared arrangement between the government and the technology developers that own the IP. And that if there's so there is a risk and there is a competitor and there is a competitive element to it, but what it does is it helps that the stage that we're talking about from feasibility to scale, and that mechanism has been adopted in the EU for getting through that technology gap. And I think that that's something that we could think about in this room as a fairly quick win to just repurpose the money.
But I have to.
I helped set that Wave Energy Scotland fund up.
No, but
I'm your
He's in the room.
Well, you got to take it.
listen, we're very constrained by time, and it's not down to us. It's because everything started late. This is the most interesting panel of the day.
Of course.
But we're not in a position to get down to the brass tacks of closing the really difficult gap is the private sector stuff, to my mind. That's the really difficult one.
Yeah.
And we haven't really been able to address
May
that in the
I
time
say
available.
one thing about that?
Finally, and then Michael.
Okay, because if you look at system change, people know that if you go through a system change and you want to change the complete system, there are different ways and different phases you go through. And one of the phases you go through is also that people are asking a lot of questions because it feels uncomfortable. People asking a lot of questions, and maybe that's the phase where Diane is in now as well. I think the best question you can ask at that moment in time is like, what do you need to feel comfortable? Because you can answer all those questions and even more questions will pop up. Then the question is, what do you need to feel comfortable? Because it can feel a bit shaky. It can feel a bit uncomfortable. It's where you have to go through. It's part of the system change.
But Nynke, at the end of the day, if I'm an investor, I'm going to want to know, why should I put my money in this as opposed to any other given thing, and how am I going to make money, because I've got stakeholders as well as interests to fulfill of my own. Michael, finally, and then we're going to move on to the workshop. I'm sorry if we've overrun time.
Unless it's a case of mistaken identity, Diane, I think you came up to me almost exactly 2 years ago at an Environmental Defence Fund dinner we both attended, and I think you've raised a little bit more than you had then. But I would encourage you, and I've spent time with someone else in the wind business trying to do the same thing, who's got, an owner who's willing to install some other competitor type thing on their ship. I think the thing for everyone to understand, it goes back to the data, it's 2 points. If you can save 10% of your emissions by installing some sort of wind, you will do it, and it'll come very soon, because everyone will have to do it on those ships that marine architecture says you can do it. It's free, the wind. You don't have to worry about any of the other technology things we've been talking about here. It's been there all the time and it's free. The second thing, and this is also important for finance as well, the wind data is now much more available, and that is what we need to judge. Is what a user needs to do is how much propulsion do they get from the wind and what is it costing. So Diane, carry on, and I think very soon, don't give up, because you will be one of the first movers that the brain will tick on in a ship owner who says, I better do this quickly on all my fleet.
We absolutely recognise they're shutting us up by not putting the mic. We absolutely recognise turn it off again. Importance of data, which is why we got the European Space Agency stuff. And there's some really cool stuff that we can do with that data. I mean, you were talking about transparency earlier. You could fluctuate your freight rate, so use it as a carrot rather than a stick. If you're using less, if you're emitting fewer GHGs, then you could perhaps sell your cargo at a better freight rate. Something like, you can do really clever stuff.
Have you tried crowdfunding?
Well, there's an interesting thing. Crowdfunders cannot be match funded by government support. So those are the sorts of things that if we could go, let governments support match funders, because crowdfunders, because that's really, we'd love to do a crowdfunder.
This is the stuff, guys, I have to cut it there. This is the stuff of a workshop. And in fact, had I been leading the workshop, I would have talked about crowdfunding. Who cares they rip you off in terms of the margin. If it gets you the money early stage, just do it. Just do it.
But you
Just
can't
work
use
out
it
how
to
much you
unlock
can-
the government
Well, we're not
funding.
doing the workshop now. Folks, I
I am.
really wish we had more
I
time.
am.
We've just scratched the surface. Oh, well, it's the workshop then? Okay, Diane, please carry on with the thing about the crowdfunding. Yeah, in the workshop.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm
Okay,
gonna- I'm
thank you.
just gonna
Thank
take
you
the
all.
mo-
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to thank our panelists, and I think this shows a really good start to a brainstorming session because you're already brainstorming. But what we're going to do is we're going to break up into 3 separate groups, and so it'll be much easier for everybody to share their ideas and write them on these wonderful bits of paper that we have prepared. So we're going to split up into system change, and so looking at large fleets, we're going to split, and then the other one is going to be early stage tech. And the other is collaboration models. So think about where you want to be. So I'm going to ask Paul Taylor, calling on you. You leave before 1 o'clock. You can leave at 1 o'clock. Can you leave? Can you work till 1 o'clock? Come on, Paul. You can do it. Great, great, great. So Paul's doing system change, large fleets. We're going to put him near the door so that he can run out right exactly at 1 o'clock. We're going to have Andrew Smith leading early stage tech, and I think I'll put it right at that back table over there, early stage tech. So clear the decks. We've got paper coming in. And then we're going to have Nynke Visser working on collaboration, leading the brainstorm on collaboration models. So basically, these guys they're just leading. You're all throwing in ideas. There's going to be bits of paper there. They're already... my beautiful assistants are already placing the bits of paper on the tables with pens. So please go to your tables and start collaborating, start innovating. And I want to say, over here, over there, over there. What? Just space them out, and that'll be fine. So and while you're moving. You're over here. Sorry, what is it? System change. So we're looking at large fleets. So full system change, but larger vessels. System change over there. Carlene's got that covered. And I want, while you're moving to your tables, to think about this to think about the urgency of the situation. Di brought up something that was really important. We're in an emergency situation. Look at the way money came out for COVID. You know, I think we need to be cognizant of the fact that the financial system needs to shift as well for us to deal with the emergency that we are in. Nynke said we want people to feel comfortable. Frankly, I think people need to start feeling really uncomfortable. We have less than a decade before we start hitting tipping points, that definition of a tipping point, something we don't come back from. We've got less than a decade to sort this out. So I think, yes, we need to get a bit uncomfortable. So please come up with some great ideas that we can build into this roadmap to zero.